Hi, folks. Democrats are having another week or reality call, and they hit ignore. Gavin Newsom's out here doing his little podcast press tour, warning us that Trump is leading a violent revolution, which is funny because the only revolution most Americans want right now is to escape anything that Gavin Newsom puts his hands on. By the way, this is the same greasy Gavin who just yesterday was saying that Biden is one of the most successful presidents in a century, which makes sense if the metric is fastest to destroy the country. And by the way, speaking of destruction, LA Mayor Karen gave the most politician answer ever when asked about the Palisades blaze, saying, "Change is underway." If by change she means she's upgrading her seat in her next flight back from Ghana, then it all makes sense.
Firefighters left that site. Days later, that became the Palisades fire, right, which became the deadliest and most dangerous fire, the most destructive fire, I should say, in the history of Los Angeles.
Yes.
How did that happen? Why did the firefighters leave, even though they said in text messages we should stay?
Right. Well, I found it extremely troubling, and I believe and called for an investigation today. You know, the after-action report that was released a couple of weeks ago was an after-action report on the January 7th fire. This is the January 1st one, and so we absolutely have to understand that. I do know, in reading the article and speaking to some of the firefighters, that many of them thought the fire was out, but clearly not enough was done, clearly.
When did you find out about these text messages?
I found out about the text messages in the LA Times.
So you had no warning about that at all?
Warning. No, I did not.
Were you informed about the fire on January 1st?
Yes, I knew about the fire on January 1st, and from what I knew and what I was told, the fire was completely put out. It was a relatively small fire. And so I just think that it is critically important that we have to look at all of these things, which is also why we have changed leadership. And so I am glad that I appointed a new fire chief. He has to go through the confirmation process in a couple of weeks, but we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Can we also get an investigation as to why Mayor Karen was in Ghana instead of Los Angeles when these fires happened? By her own admission, she already knew the fires had started, and according to leaked recordings, she was aware that Santa Ana winds were forecast to be some of the strongest on record that week, capable of reigniting dormant embers and spreading new blazes. Folks, that's all the confirmation you need. Sure, there's room for plausible deniability in the details, but the fact remains the mayor knew there were fires. She knew there were dangerous winds coming, and she still chose to leave the country on this mission that she was given by Biden. I wonder why. Maybe someone in City Hall, one of the many Democrat socialists collecting a paycheck to serve the people, could actually get off their seats and run a real investigation for once, because what the people of Los Angeles are sick and tired of is lip service. Politicians pretending to care while they make life harder, burn through taxpayer money, and leave our city in ashes. Literally. Mayor Karen doesn't care, folks. This is the same mayor who appointed the very leadership that failed on the ground that day. The same system of cronies and careerists that let firefighters walk away from a smoldering site that later became the most destructive fire in Los Angeles history. This isn't all by accident. It's the byproduct of a culture of unaccountable leadership where image management matters more than actual public service and safety. And until we break that culture, Los Angeles we'll keep burning, folks.
You got rid of demoted Kristen Crowley, who was the chief of the LAFD at the time of the Palisades fire,
yes,
because of her performance, according to you. So essentially, why were no firefighters pre-deployed to the Palisades?
Well, that was a key issue, a key factor that led to the change that took place. Now,
do you bear any responsibility for that, though?
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we all know I am the mayor and the buck stops with me.
Yeah,
however,
right.
If I find something that is deficient in a leader in a department, then it is my responsibility to make that change. And so I made the change. We had a interim fire chief in, and what I did was I conducted a national search. We took our time, and I believe we came up with a leader who is going to lead the department and transform what needs to be changed within the department.
And this is Jamie Moore, who you appointed.
Jaime Moore,
who you appointed
right.
This week. I'm sorry about
Yes.
that.
Clearly, the buck isn't stopping with the mayor, because if it were, she wouldn't be in office right now. She should oust herself, honestly. Just say, peace, I'm out, because that level of failure and that level of shamelessness blame shifting is purely disqualifying. If only Mayor Karen paid as much attention to Los Angeles as she does to pronouncing Jamie Moore's name correctly, maybe we'd still have the neighborhoods that burned down. And let's be clear, folks, this focus on the fire department from Mayor Karen is deliberate. It's the scapegoat she chose to wash her hands of responsibility for her own negligence. What about the LEDWP? What about the St. Ignace reservoir that sat nearly empty when the fire broke out, despite the department's director pulling over $800,000 a year in salary? As of just a couple of months ago, that reservoir was still not refilled, and no one's been held accountable. Spencer Pratt and others have been shouting about this for months, but City Hall pretends not to hear. Meanwhile, the mayor talks about change being underway and accuses critics of politicizing the tragedy later in this interview. But you can't politicize something that's already political. This is her administration, her leadership, her failure squarely falls on her. She lied to President Trump and residents of the Palisades and Pasadena, promising to expedite rebuilding permits, yet nearly a year later, many homeowners still can't rebuild because of red tape her own city maintains. The pattern here is the real story, folks. Moral grandstanding, empty gestures, and a refusal to face the consequences of power. Karen doesn't want accountability. She wants applause. And until Los Angeles demands the former instead of the latter, the city will keep burning literally and politically. And speaking of burning politically, renowned flamer Gavin Newsom is out here just doing what Gavin does, being a crackhead.
Look, this is weakness masquerading in strength. This is classic Trump and Trumpism. This guy is historically weak. And these are acts of a weak person that is trying to appear strong. It has the form and substance of fog. You even heard representatives of the Trump administration tried to digest and explain this, and they couldn't even do it. So, look, I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. Watching the President of the United States in front of Xi, we're good. I mean, he was negotiating away this country in the first 5 minutes of the photo op. He came back with nothing. He got played by President Xi.
He says he got a good deal.
He said that. How many trade deals? 90 in 90 days? How many have you read and reviewed? How many have been signed? 0. His policy is press release. And the fact that you and I will be paying more for toys this Christmas, and we are already paying more for Halloween, bears truth to my assertion of the recklessness of his policies. He's wrecking this country. The jobs market is weak. Inflation is starting to creep back up. This is unprecedented to see in such a short period of time, this kind of destruction to the progress we were experiencing that he inherited.
You can't even respond to this without laughing. Greasy Gavin is out here completely rewriting history, calling Trump weak and claiming he inherited progress from Biden. If progress means record inflation, record gas prices, record grocery costs, and a collapsing middle class, then sure. That is truly Democrat progress. America under Biden looked more like a managed decline than an actual recovery. By the way, this is the same guy who turned California into a test lab for decline, a place where homelessness, crime, and a flight of the middle class are at record highs, and yet he calls all of this success. Newsom genuinely seems to believe decay is progress, dysfunction is some sort of leadership, and moral posturing is his form of policy. And let's keep it a buck, folks. Part of Gavin's tirade is just pure jealousy. He's just mad that Trump got the spotlight with Xi Jinping, the same Xi that Newsom practically rolled out the red carpet for when he came to San Francisco last year. Remember that? Newsom scrubbed the streets clean like a guilty house guest, hiding the mess after years of letting addicts, tents, and chaos dominate the city. Why? Well, because it finally benefited him politically. But the truth behind Gavin's behavior is that California's economy is dangerously dependent on Chinese imports flowing through its ports, while its tax base collapses as millions of working and middle-class families flee the state. And instead of fixing that, Greasy Gavin's plugging the demographic hole with mass illegal migration, offering free health care and state benefits to millions while running a multi-billion-dollar deficit projected to drain California's reserves within the next year and a half. And by the way, when that financial crisis finally hits, and it will, he'll be long gone, passing the buck to whoever is next in line to be governor. That's the Democrat way, folks. Burn through the treasury, moralize the ashes, then vanish before the collapse. If anything is historically weak, it's that.
Where is the President of the United States now? He's overseas. It's important to be overseas, but hold on. Don't you think it's more important to address the domestic crisis of his own making right now?
One side's not even talking when 20 million Americans' health care is about to be ripped away. The other side, the Democrats, are there to talk and negotiate and try to figure out a solution.
And Donald Trump quite literally doesn't give a damn that people's insurance, health insurance, is going to be lost or tripled because he, in his big, beautiful bill, just did the biggest cuts to Medicaid in American history. Forgive me for the long-windedness. God bless the Democrats for standing up on all these things and being willing to fight for these things.
Crackhead Newsom just has to get off the pipe, man. This guy is making absolutely no sense, rambling in circles, calling Trump weak, and somehow managing to sound like he's describing himself. You watch this podcast clip, and it's so awkwardly chopped up. It looks like less of an interview and more like an AI-generated conversation. Newsom claims Trump is enjoying this, while the man is literally doing the job of the president, going around the world, meeting foreign leaders, conducting diplomacy, representing American interests abroad. Meanwhile, Gavin's over here running a state that people are fleeing by the millions. He's destroyed one of the most beautiful, prosperous places in American history and still has the audacity to lecture anyone about leadership. California, under his watch, is number one in homelessness, number one in poverty, number one in cost of living, number one in addiction, number one in gas prices, number one in income tax, number one in retail theft, and leading the nation in out-migration. And all while this is happening, he's buying his third $9 million mansion and doing podcast tours pretending to be presidential. Hey, maybe instead of criticizing someone actually doing their job, how about you do yours, Gavin? Fix this broken state that you made broken. Because right now, Greasy Gavin isn't leading California. He's just straight up looting it in hopes of his presidential dreams.
This is a revolution. Ian Brenner said it in his blog the other day. Ian's not prone to hyperbole. It's a revolution that's going on in this country. And I think you have to start using those words. He's attacking every single institution of independent thinking. And he's succeeding because we're still playing by the old set of rules. And so my party needs to focus first and foremost on recognizing that. And then we'll reconcile, be more culturally normal, more reform-oriented, talk about service and patriotism. And we'll continue to build on the legacy, I would argue, of our former president, who I think was one of the most successful presidents in the last century, and that is Joe Biden.
This man is making Whitney Houston at the height of her crack use sound rational. Seriously. Greasy Gavin, you got to stop, dude. There's no violent revolution coming. The only revolution happening is inside your own party, or it's being hollowed out from within by socialists and communists who've hijacked it for power. These aren't liberals anymore. They're anti-capitalist activists with zero interest in preserving American life as we know it. So what's your plan for that, Mr. Governor? What's your strategy for dealing with the Democrat Party that's been overtaken by democratic socialists of America, by Marxist ideologues like Zohar Mamdani, who openly call for abolishing private property and who, by the way, are winning elections and gaining influence? There are multiple California Democrats already endorsed by these groups. How long are you going to pretend they don't exist? The truth is, you're part of an old political dynasty that's protected by generational power, passed around like a family heirloom from the Browns to the Pelosi's to the Gettys to the Newsoms, then back to the beginning. That's the only reason you've survived this long, because ideologically, you're already a relic of a party that no longer exists. Just look at who's next in line for California governor. Katie Porter, your own party's rising star, who was caught defending the idea that pedophilia could be treated as a sexual orientation. That's not progressivism. That's moral rot dressed up as tolerance. And that's the real revolution happening in America right now. The collapse of the Democrat Party's moral center, replaced by a radical movement that hates this country. Look, folks, there is an expiration date on Gavin Newsom's power, and he knows it. He knows that this presidential flirtation is his last shot at higher office before his own party pushes him out for being too moderate, too establishment, too obsolete for the revolution it's become. And sure, he'll land softly. He's a multimillionaire with multiple mansions, a Getty-funded safety net, and a network of nonprofits and political front groups run by him and his partner that will keep the money flowing. He'll be just fine, but the country won't. Because what's dying alongside his career is the remaining sanity inside the Democrat Party. If Newsom truly cares about America, this would be the moment for courage, to call out the Marxist rot hollowing out his own side, to stand against the DSA radicals openly undermining law, order, and private enterprise in places like Los Angeles and Chicago. But instead, he plays along, pretending it's still 2012, pretending this isn't the slow motion collapse of his party's soul. So what happens when Democrats finish cannibalizing themselves? What happens when progressivism fully mutates into authoritarian socialism and the so-called moderates keep their mouths shut until it's too late? Maybe we'll see political violence. Maybe we'll see a silent rebellion at the ballot box. But one way or another, there will be a reckoning, because America will not and cannot become a communist nation. And maybe Gavin will finally realize that only after his own party turns on him at the primaries. That's maybe when he'll learn the hard way that you can't make peace with an ideology that eats everything, including its own. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.